Animals in Peril by McCullough. From the Fireman Brian series. One day out in the field, the sheep was kept in its pen. Paul Gordon was taking a walk with Gabby Pullman. Perry the dog was on the leash. Then, the sheep escaped from its pen. Paul was trying to turn Perry the dog into a sheepdog by having him herd the sheep into its pen. Perry the dog was running around frantically trying to get the sheep back into its pen, but Perry the dog just chased after the sheep. Perry the dog wasn't a sheepdog at all. The sheep was still running away and Perry the dog chased after the sheep. Perry the dog and the sheep were gone. Paul and Gabby needed to find out where they went. Meanwhile in the mountains, Paul and Gabby found Perry the dog and the sheep stuck on a cliff ledge. Perry the dog and the sheep were in peril. It was time to call mountain rescue. The mountain rescue team showed up. Fireman Justin Lewis and Fireman Brian arrived at the scene in the multi-purpose 4x4 crane. Firefighter Ellie Washington arrived at the scene in the four-wheeler. The firefighters got out of their vehicles. Fireman Brian and firefighter Ellie Washington were going to rescue Perry the dog and the sheep. The cliff ledge was too steep to climb down. Fireman Brian and firefighter Ellie Washington were going to have to abseil down the cliff ledge. Firefighter Ellie Washington got the harnesses. Fireman Justin Lewis was going to activate the multi-purpose 4x4 crane's winch. The ropes are already attached to the multi-purpose 4x4 crane's lifting arm. The ropes were attached to firefighter Ellie Washington's and Fireman Brian's abseiling gear. The harnesses were attached to the abseiling gear. Firefighter Ellie Washington and Fireman Brian were ready to go. Firefighter Ellie Washington and Fireman Brian abseiled down into the cliff ledge. The animals got themselves into a pickle. Firefighter Ellie Washington and Fireman Brian put the harnesses around Perry the dog and the sheep. Fireman Justin Lewis activated the multi-purpose 4x4 crane's winch to lift up firefighter Ellie Washington and Fireman Brian and the animals out of the cliff ledge. The animals were out of the cliff ledge and they were safe. Veterinarian Victoria Henderson arrived at the scene in the veterinary 4x4. Veterinarian Victoria Henderson got out of the veterinary 4x4. She was going to give Perry the dog and the sheep a check over to make sure they are okay. Meanwhile in the field, veterinarian Victoria Henderson was checking the sheep and Perry the dog over to make sure they are okay in the sheep's pen. Paul was very sorry. Paul just thought that Perry the dog was a good sheepdog. Fireman Brian tells Paul that maybe Perry the dog might make a good sheepdog one day. Veterinarian Victoria Henderson has checked Perry the dog and the sheep over and they're both fine. The end.